Hello students, welcome to Learning Management System, Department of Collegiate and Technical Education. Today the topic which I am going to talk about is listening skills. I would like to start my topic with the famous quote by Dalai Lama which goes as follows. Now when you talk, you are only repeating what you have already known. But when you listen, you may learn something new. Now, this particular quotation itself shows us the importance of listening, which is the most important aspect in any of our communicating skills. Okay, the tables of contents are as follows. We have an introduction, and then we go to effective listening, and then the objectives of listening. We also have the features of good listening, and certain physical barriers to listening. We have included active listening processes and certain tips to effective listening. And finally, the conclusion. Along with that, we have an audio clip as a part of our activity and MCQs related to that particular activity. Okay, let us see the session outcome. Now, at the end of the session, I would like students to learn, or I'm very sure that the students would be able to comprehend the language of the, understand the language of the speaker, and at the same time follow the tone, the pace, the rhythm of that speaker's accent. It also enables the students to be a patient listener, and it also enables our students to learn the strategies to listen actively. Yes, now coming to the introduction part of it, the first and the foremost of communication skills that we learn in our life is the listening skill. Now, listening is one of the most effective skills which is wisely disregarded because it requires a lot of attention. Good listening involves encouraging other people to say interesting things and understanding those things, and then being very sensitive to their thoughts and feelings. Now, the research findings say that 1/4 of our waking time is spent in listening. That is 32.7% of our waking time we spend in listening. So this shows us importance of listening skills. Okay, now next we'll go to effective listening. Now what is this effective listening? Now effective listening is a process of analyzing sounds, then organizing these sounds and we interpret the message that is delivered and then our response to the message. This is effective listening. Once again, so process where we analyze, we study the sounds, then organize these sounds, then interpreting the message that is delivered and our response to the message. Now, to listen well, we need a mental concentration. Not just mental concentration, but a sort of generosity or something like empathy towards the listener, understanding the listener, and at the same time a sort of self-confidence. Effective listening is paying attention, then interpreting, and at the same time remembering sound stimuli. Listening is an active process which requires your attention. Listening is an active process which requires a lot of attention from the listener. And that's why we say a good listener is always a good speaker. Yes, that is effective listening. And next we'll go to the objectives of listening. Now what are the objectives of listening? Why do we listen? Why do we listen to anybody? Why should we listen? No, we listen to learn. Why do we listen? As students, we need to listen. Why do we listen? Because we learn, we know, and that is knowledge. To learn and to know is knowledge. And that happens only when we are good listeners. Then it enables us to it enhances one's understanding. It increases our understanding. So the objective of listening is also to advise, to counsel, and not only that, we also listen to our uh, relieve one's boredom. Example, um, a music, a podcast, or listening to videos, listening to audios, videos, etc. Now features. Now what are the features of good listening? Features of good listening are hearing, understanding, and at the same time judging. Now hearing, when we talk about hearing, is listening to catch what the speaker says. That is the most important aspect. Now hearing is not just listening. Hearing, in the sense you are listening, you are trying to understand what the speaker says. At the same time, understanding is you take what you have heard, you understand it in your own way. That is understanding, comprehending, judging. This is also very important. Once you understand what the speaker has said, you think about whether it makes sense. Now these are the features of good listening. Okay. Now we also see that there are certain physical barriers to listening. Now, what are these physical barriers, or what stops us from listening? Why don't we listen? Why don't we listen? Now, these are some of the physical barriers which stops us from listening or effective listening. Noise or distraction. Whenever there is noise, we are not able to listen properly. And second is the poor acoustics, that is the quality of the sound, whether it may be an audio or a video or a lecture. The sound, poor acoustics, it acts as a barrier to listening. And also the third one is a defective mechanical device, because of which you are unable to listen properly. Frequent interruption. Somebody interrupts and you're unable to listen, or you're interrupted every time, which disrupts your listening. Then an uncomfortable sitting position. You're not very comfortable where you're sitting, and this disturbs your listening capacity. And lastly, we have this particular point. There's too much of information. When we have when we have lots of information, this acts as a barrier to our effective listening. Okay. Now, how does this active listening process work? What is active listening process? Now, we have these 5 points which we consider as active listening processes. That is hearing, filtering, comprehending, remembering, and responding. Now, hearing is that particular sensory perception of sound. Sensory perception, how well we are able to hear that particular sound. Filtering is nothing but sensing the heard sound, sensing the heard sound, and what we do is we need to filter filtering the unwanted, taking only the wanted sound and filtering, removing the unwanted. And the third one is comprehending. Comprehending is nothing but understanding, grasping ability and the things which we absorb. And the fourth point is remembering. Remembering is very much necessary for us to store in memory or recollect things. Whatever things we have been able to listen, remembering it and store in memory for us to recollect it. Then the last one is responding. Responding is finally how we react to that particular message. Finally, you react to that particular message as responding. So this is the active listening process. Okay, now I'd like to give you some tips to effective listening. Now, what are the tips to effective listening? How can we improve our listening capacity? Now, first and foremost, it's very important for us to give full attention. In the sense, give our 100% full attention. And the second point is make sure that your mind is focused. This is very much important today. Focused. Make sure that your mind is focused. Then let the speaker finish before you begin to talk. Don't interrupt the speaker. Let the speaker finish and then listen completely and then you start talking. Then it's also important that you listen to the main ideas, the main points. And later on, you ask questions. And after you ask the questions, you give a good feedback. I feel these are the few tips to effective listening. Now, to conclude, I would like to say that listening is an active process which requires your attention. Now, obviously, it's a difficult skill, but practice will help you to improve this skill. Now, what is necessary is by taking few minutes every day, few minutes, you need to sit still in a quiet room and listen to the sound of nature and all the inhabitants of the nature. Just listen. Be still and silent for a few minutes in a day, which enables you to be a good listener. And also listen to interviews in TV or in radio or podcasts or commentaries and news or lectures, talks, all of which would enhance your listening skills. Okay, now coming to the activity part of our session, we have here an audio clip by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, MP. His famous speech delivered at Oxford Union in England. So let us have the audio so that our students listen. I'm sure will listen carefully to this audio and later on answer the MCQ.
President, gentlemen, ladies of the House, standing here with 8 minutes in my hands and at this venerable and rather magnificent institution, I was going to assure you that I belong to the Henry VIII School of Public Speaking, that as Henry VIII said to his wives, I shall not keep you long. But now finding myself the seventh speaker out of 8 in what must already seem a rather long evening to you, I rather feel like Henry VIII's last wife. I more or less know what's expected of me, but I'm not sure how to do it any differently. Perhaps what I should do is really try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced by the opposition today. We had, for example, Sir Richard Ottaway challenging the very idea that it could be argued that the economic situation of the colonies was actually worsened by the experience of British colonialism. Well, I stand to offer you the Indian example, Sir Richard. India's share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Why? Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain. Britain's rise for 200 years was financed by its depredations in India. In fact, Britain's industrial revolution was actually premised upon the deindustrialization of India. The handloom weavers, for example, famed across the world, whose products were exported around the world, Britain came right in. There were actually these weavers making fine muslin, light as woven air, it was said. And Britain came right in, smashed their thumbs, broke their looms, imposed tariffs and duties on their cloth and products, and started, of course, taking the raw materials from India and shipping back manufactured cloth, flooding the world's markets with what became the products of the dark and satanic mills of Victorian England. That meant that the weavers in India became beggars, and India went from being a world-famous exporter of finished cloth into an importer, went from having 27% of world trade to less than 2%. Meanwhile, colonialists like Robert Clive bought their rotten boroughs in England on the proceeds of their loot in India, while taking the Hindi word loot into their dictionaries as well as their habits. And the British had the gall to call him Clive of India, as if he belonged to the country, when all he really did was to ensure that much of the country belonged to him. By the end of the 19th century, the fact is that India was already Britain's biggest cash cow, the world's biggest purchaser of British goods and exports, and the source of highly paid employment for British civil servants. We literally paid for our own oppression. And as has been pointed out, the wealthy Victorian British families that made their money out of the slave economy, 1/5 of the elites of the wealthy class in Britain in the 19th century owed their money to transporting 3 million Africans across the waters. And in fact, in 1833, when slavery was abolished, what happened was that a compensation of £20 million was paid, not as reparations to those who had lost their lives or who had suffered or been oppressed by slavery, but to those who had lost their property. I was struck by the fact that your Wi-Fi password at this union commemorates the name of Mr. Gladstone, the great liberal hero. Well, I'm sorry, his family was one of those who benefited from this compensation. Staying with India, between 15 and 29 million Indians died of starvation in British-induced famines. The most famous example, of course, was the Great Bengal Famine during the Second World War, when 4 million people died because Winston Churchill, deliberately as a matter of written minuted policy, proceeded to divert essential supplies from civilians in Bengal to sturdy Tommies and Europeans as reserve stockpiles. He said that the starvation of anyway underfed Bengalis mattered much less than that of sturdy Greeks. This is Churchill's actual quote. And when conscience-stricken British officials wrote to him, pointing out that people were dying because of this decision, he peevishly wrote in the margins of the file, "Why hasn't Gandhi died yet?" So all notions that the British were trying to do their colonial enterprise out of enlightened despotism, to try and bring the benefits of colonialism and civilization to the benighted heathen. I'm sorry, Churchill's conduct in 43 simply one example of many that gave a lie to this myth. As others have said on the proposition, violence and racism were the reality of the colonial experience.
Speech by Shashi Tharoor at the Oxford Union. Now, related, I am sure all of you have listened to this particular audio, and here are some of the multiple choice MCQs which I would like you all to answer. Now, as far as Shashi Tharoor's speech is concerned, it's not enough that you hear it once. It's necessary that you need to listen to it once, not just once, twice, 3 times. which enables you to answer these multiple choice questions. Now, the first question is as follows. Now, according to the speaker, how long did the British rule over India? According to the speaker, how long did the British rule over India? Is it 100 years? Is it 150 years? 200 years? Or 250 years? Yes. And the answer is, what's the answer? Have you guessed it right? Yes, the answer is 200 years. Yes. And the next question is, how many speakers address the House? How many speakers are supposed to address the House? Is it 10? Is it 8? Is it 6 or 4? And the answer, if you have guessed right, is 8 speakers. And the third question. Now, which school did the speaker belong to? Now, which school did the speaker belong to? Is it the Delhi Public School? Is it the British Public School? Henry VIII School of Public Speaking? Or Oxford Public Speaking School? And the answer, if you have guessed it right, students, it is Henry VIII School of Public Speaking. Okay, the next question. The tone of the speaker. The tone of the speaker is one of delight, disgust, outburst, or is it anger? Delight, disgust, outburst, or anger? The tone of the speaker is one of delight. The next one. The speaker wants the British dash for reparation. The speaker wants the British to dash for reparation. Is it to apologize? Is it compensate? Is it to revolt or rebuke? And the answer is apologize. Okay, the next one. The speaker mentions one of our great leaders in the speech. Speaker mentions one of our great leaders. Is it Gandhiji, Nehru, Bose, or Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel? Our answer is Gandhiji. Next one. The speaker was allotted the time. The time allotted to the speaker to speak. Was it 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes? And the answer is 8 minutes. Okay, the next question. The speaker mentioned the name of a king in this particular audio. Who is the king? The speaker mentions the name of a king in this audio. And who is the speaker? Is it King Charles, King Simon, King Henry, or King James? The answer, students, is King James. Next question. The speaker refers to one of the worst famine in India. Which is the worst famine in India mentioned by the speaker? Is it the famine of Gujarat, the famine of Bengal, famine of Jodhpur, or the famine of Kashmir? And the answer is famine of Bengal. And the last question is as follows, students. Shashi Tharoor's speech is addressed to the British Parliament, the public, the press, or the Indian Parliament? And the answer is the British Parliament. Okay, with this we finish with our MCQ, and I'm sure the students are able to answer, or were able to answer these questions effectively with their effective listening capacity. Okay, here is a small acknowledgement, and here is our alumnus team. I'd like to thank a moderator, a subject expert, and all the content developers. Please write to us your suggestions about the contents, the tool and format, etc. I hope you enjoyed this session of active listening uh, related to our listening skills. Thank you, one and all. Thank you, students.